So welcome everyone to this Similarweb webinar. My name is Baruch Toledano, and I lead our digital marketing intelligence solution. But I'm also going to talk today about the impact of our additional solutions, which is also our digital research solution. So we have a mix of solution. So let's get started. So it's no secret that we are entering some uncertainty times, and it's very clear that many organizations are rethinking the way that they're basically looking into how are they playing in the game of growth, right? Rising inflation, and just overall, how are they still maintaining a rate of growth that their organization need? This is particularly the case when we're looking at countries like the United States and Western Europe, but also seeing across Asia that the rate of growth is actually slowing down. This actually makes many organizations to rethink about their spend. And we see it with our customers in many cases, and they've been asking a lot about how they can quantify the impact of the marketing activities and in general, the technologies that they're using, both to decide which marketing activities they're doing, as well as where they should be investing their time. And we were really looking at this problem in a variety of angles, and we decided actually to bring into this methodology the guys at Forrester. They will have been really the expert here to allow us to sort of help our customers where they can leverage their total economic impact methodologies to accurately represent the impact on the digital intelligence. We've used it over a large skincare CPG, a known brand in this study. So it's a fairly large brand. With that being said, just for those of you who just joined us, we have a lot of tactics that can be used even in smaller brands. And in this particular webinar, we'll also show you some micro ways that you could use in order to bring it into your day-to-day tactics in improving and really quantifying the impact of the things that you're doing by leveraging the Similarweb application. So in this study, we're going to cover sort of our two flagship offering, as I said, one for digital marketing, which is we will refer to as the digital marketers DMI, and one for researcher, which you can see a variety of roles in the organization, which we would refer to as DRI, and the impact on their respective business. So joining me today also in this webinar is Amy Harrison, who is a senior consultant from Forrester. She's waving her hand. And she's actually conducted the work on behalf of Similarweb, but really this is all done independently, directly with the customer. So I'll pass it now to Amy. There will be time for questions. You are also welcome to put them in the question box, and we will get to them at the end. But let's get started. And Amy, why don't you walk us through?
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Baruch. I appreciate it. This was a really fun study to work on. So I'm anxious to tell everybody about it. So maybe you could take us to the next slide. So here's our agenda. In the next 20 or so minutes, I'll tell you what we heard from the Similarweb customer, walk you through the analysis, and really give you a framework so that you can think about how to apply this same recipe to your own organization. As well, I think it's really important that we talk a lot about what we heard from the CPG company that Baruch mentioned, and sort of tell you their story so that you can understand where some of these numbers came from. All right, so let's get started. So a piece of research that Forrester conducted and was published in January of this year said that respondents at advanced insights-driven companies are 8.5 times more likely than really beginners in this space to report at least 20% year-over-year revenue growth. These companies use these insights to be more innovative, competitive, and it allows them to differentiate their products and customer experience effectively. So we thought this was a great introduction to the TEI study, which really looks at how this one organization used Similarweb's insights to optimize their return on ad spend and capitalize on what consumers were saying that they needed in the market. All right, so let's dive into what this TEI is all about. Next slide. So we built the TEI methodology over 20 years ago because Forrester found that 90% of IT decision makers in North American enterprises found value in a business case study. So I think we can all agree that a business case study is really important when making business decisions on tech investments. But really the question becomes what kind of business case, because they do vary greatly in quality. So Forrester's TEI methodology, or total economic impact, is really comprehensive. So most methodologies look at costs and benefits, but few other methodologies look at risk and none look at flexibility or future options. So really there are four major components to Forrester's TEI methodology: benefits, costs, flexibility, and risk. So the risk component of this methodology is where we mathematically really pressure test the assumptions and calculations. So that means that we decrease the benefit numbers and we increase the cost numbers to make sure that the analysis is conservative and defensible. And we vary those adjustments for different categories of benefits and costs based on what we heard from the customer interviews. So flexibility in the TEI case study does not mean, better, faster, cheaper, as that's covered within the costs and benefits section. Instead, it refers to the opportunities or the options that the technology investment today may produce for an organization in the future. So whether or not the organization, eventually exercises those options, they represent value for the buyer. And so we think it really provides a framework for a more flexible roadmap in the future. So the TEI framework provides a realistic and conservative picture of the investment, helping you to make a more defensible and confident decision. All right. So for this project, we followed a number of steps. We began with a look at our existing research as well as interviews with Similarweb subject matter experts in order to really understand the value proposition of the platform. Then we conducted 3 different interviews with the same Similarweb customer to understand their experiences with the solution and the impact that it had on their organization. Then we took all of that data and we constructed a representative financial model based on what we heard during the customer interview process to really provide organizations a way to measure and evaluate financial impact. Finally, we wrote up the findings in the case study that represents both the numerical analysis, but also the color behind it, sharing a lot of the stories of the interviewed customers. So some fine print language. Really the key points here are this webinar is an abridged version of the case study. You'll hear this a few times through the presentation, but we really do encourage you to read the full study. The case study is commissioned by Similarweb, but Forrester maintains editorial control. This is an objective third-party study of Similarweb and does not imply endorsement. Lastly, know that your own mileage may vary. So if you were to take some of these formulas and apply them to your own business, your results may be different. Okay, now that we've got all the process stuff out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Time for the big reveal. You can skip to the next slide. So here is the answer to the math part of the study, and it's a really compelling number. We, through the calculations, we came up with an ROI of 642%. benefits of 16.93 million, and a net present value of 14.65 million. Forrester's interviews with a Similarweb customer found that these numbers were also risk adjusted. And if you'd like a Finance 101 description of all of these terms, take a look at Appendix A in the actual case study. All of these calculations are described there. So the quote you see here really reflects the partnership that the interviewed organization developed with Similarweb. The customer described how they worked together with the Similarweb team to do more than just optimize their paid search. They really understood the client's business, and they built a model to help them make changes, not only to get the best return on investment for their paid search spend, but also the data showed them where else they could make changes to maximize their digital investments. So let's take a look at how we arrived at these numbers. Again, we mentioned that the customer that we interviewed, we were actually able to interview 3 different decision makers from this Similarweb customer. They were a very large global organization with 80 billion in revenue and over 130,000 employees. So we were able to interview these 3 different roles, and it was great because they worked in different geographies, and so they really had slightly varied, they had different responsibilities as well. So it really allowed us to gather varied perspectives. All right, next slide. So when we perform this kind of analysis, we really want to understand what life was like for the company before using Similarweb. So the Associate Director of Digital Measurement mentioned that she felt like she was flying blind. She could see her group's performance, but wasn't able to see how competitors pursued different categories. So they made business decisions that they felt weren't grounded in data. Interviewees also told us how their organization gathered digital intelligence by collecting data from disparate sources and performing a lot of time-consuming analysis. Or they'd ask their agency partners for a competitive analysis, which was really expensive, and left the firm to rely on the agency data. So they really needed to trust that that data was accurate. We also heard stories like the quote that you see here about interviewees relying heavily on their agency partners to better understand what's happening in their market. And that analysis really was expensive, $50K. And again, it's only as good as the data that the agency has access to. So with access to Similarweb, that same type of analysis that cost $50K was now able to be done in-house with near real-time data in a matter of days instead of months. So next slide. So given those challenges, interviewees wanted to find a solution that would provide a value proposition for them that would enable effective keyword search with a solid return. So these were their requirements. Provide improved visibility into both competitor info and internal and competitive content. And these insights really would lead them to make a better strategic decisions, and therefore, find better returns. So the bottom line is that the interviewees told us that they chose Similarweb based on its strength and understanding of digital shopper behavior, and they were really impressed with the breadth of the data available. All right, next slide. So getting to the heart of the study, we're going to take you through the benefits that you see here individually, and we'll discuss the stories behind each benefit. However, within the study itself, you can see exactly how we calculated each benefit, including a table with formulas. So if you want to try and replicate this yourself. All right, let's move to the next slide and talk about our biggest benefit, which was the recovered cost of paid search spend. So the organization reported spending more than 30 million on paid search for its consumer and health and beauty brands, but they weren't seeing the kind of investment that they expected. In fact, some of the firm's brands were seeing a return as low as 20 cents on the dollar. Yes, you heard that correctly, 20 cents on the dollar. That means that they were losing 80 cents for every dollar they invested. Given this, marketing leadership was starting to direct them to drop their paid search strategy. But the senior director of insights and analytics really needed a chance to see if she could turn that around, because she really understood the value of search and what it means not only to return on investment, but the longer term brand strategy. So after working with Similarweb to create a diagnostic tool that automated against their search words, they were able to make strategic alterations in their search strategy. So ultimately, the organization was able to improve its ROI to more than $1. Okay, so how did they do that? First, we heard about how the senior director of insights and analytics described how she had developed a strategy and refined her budgets both for on-site and off-site search. Previously, they had separate budgets for each and they optimized them separately, but they realized that they are really directly complementary because many searches start on Google, for example, and then end up on a retailer site. Retailers are also driving people to their own sites through external search, and they wanted to figure out if they had the right split between on-site and off-site search. And they found that they were way over-invested in off-site search versus where most of the activity was happening. So they shifted the budget to be accurate. So previously, the spend was 70-30 on-site to off-site. But they shifted the budget to be accurate to where the searches were occurring. They switched it all the way to 40-60 and in some cases 50-50. So that had a major impact on their return on investment. Another interviewee, the digital analytics manager, explained how they were able to optimize AdWord spend. So each AdWord gets assigned a quality score that impacts the discounts for each applied word. So the better the quality score, the lower in the cost per click. So by improving that score, they were seeing a 10 to 15% drop in their cost per click on average. So that was another tactic that they used that we calculated here. So when Forrester builds these TEI models, we always try to be as conservative as possible with our analysis. So we attributed 50% of that recovered search spend to Similarweb. The other 50% of the credit really goes to things outside of the actual data and the platform. So it goes to things like the brain power behind the analytics or the other internal or external data sources used, or the manpower in creating the automated tool we described. So those are some of the examples that we heard about, which allowed us to really calculate this $12.1 million benefit around the recovered cost of paid search spend. All right, next slide. So one last example of how the CPG company was able to improve their ROI was to capitalize on some of the underrepresented categories that they didn't have a lot of competitors in. So they really doubled down on their investment in those categories and they aligned their paid search with their content strategy. And they were able to drive traffic to sites which hosted content relevant to that category. So we'll talk more about this when we get to the unquantified benefits section, but this ROI model captures a short-term metric, meaning there's a short horizon for where the company looked for payback to result in sales. But an investment in search has much longer-term implications. It's an influencer, causing your brand to be put into sort of the consideration phase of a consumer's journey, which may not result in an immediate sale, but may lead to a future purchase. So all of that to say that search is an important strategy for both short-term sales and longer-term strategic brand awareness. All right, so our next benefit was really around the recovered cost of PR and programmatic spend. So our interviewees used the intelligence they gained from Similarweb not only to impact their paid search, but other important marketing tactics like PR and programmatic spend. So in gaining a richer understanding of the keywords that consumers were searching for, they were able to understand specifically which words were worth investing in. So the most popular keyword search, which really has the highest price tag, they found was not necessarily aligned with what consumers were actually interested in. So in the beauty category, for example, a term like facial moisturizer might have been a really expensive keyword, and the company previously bid on that, but it wasn't winning the consumer click. Publishers that produced content around beauty were actually drawing that traffic because consumers wanted to read beauty magazines, for example. So the team studied the keywords that were driving consumers to these beauty content sites versus the singular word for their brand. And the CPG company is not a content publisher. Traditionally, their content was really specific to their brand or the category versus, beauty tips that consumers really want to read about. And so they realized they'll never compete with the publisher. So to inform their new tactics, they followed the click path through Similarweb to understand what keywords that consumers were clicking on to go to those publisher sites, and then what they did when they got there. If the consumers were looking, for example, at the top 10 ways to fight dryness, was their product showing up in that content? Or they looked at the display ads that were on the page and determined if there was an opportunity to actually own that display ad. So if the consumer landed on a page about beauty, but the display ad was about dog food, probably not a good match. And it wasn't going to be good for that publisher either, because people weren't going to be clicking irrelevant ads. So the interviewee described how they want the publishers to how they wanted to show up on the publisher space. And so they ended up paying for and bidding on those ads, or they'd work with their PR teams to get them featured in an article about the brands that were being written about. So by executing on tactics like these I just described, the CPG company was able to repurpose their spend in search that really had an ROI, and they found a better use for those dollars from ad placements or those PR efforts I described. And they went from seeing a return of 80 cents on the dollar to over $1.15. So again, we're always trying to be conservative with how we're attributing this revenue or how we're building this revenue. So in the model, we attributed 10% of the credit for this benefit to Similarweb. And because the overall dollars here were so large, it still resulted in an over $4 million risk-adjusted return over 3 years. All right, so let's move to our third benefit, which is reduced spend on third-party data sources and capabilities. The more experience the company gained in working with Similarweb, they realized they had redundant capabilities and sources of data. So the digital analytics manager was able to reduce the scope of their contracts with 3 different vendors that had overlapping capabilities. So in addition to that, because of the depth of the data available, they chose to keep their contract only with an e-commerce data provider, but they were actually able to reduce the overall spend. And in this case, they reported saving over $500,000. So again, this case study focuses on quantifying the benefits that Similarweb customers described, but I also heard about some other compelling benefits that weren't readily quantified. So we're going to take a minute to go through these because they are important, even if they didn't share hard numbers with us around this. So I mentioned short-term ROI, really measured in sales versus longer-term brand impact. So again, business leaders at the interviewees organization considered significantly decreasing their paid search budget because of the initial ROI. But they realized that ROI really just has a short horizon because the measure of payback is in immediate sales results. But they shared with us, a lot of their categories are not products that are actually purchased through, e-commerce sites or sold online at all. But consumers will often search for these products to inform their decisions, even though the ultimate sale happens in the store. So again, I just want to emphasize that the investment in search is really worth the corresponding impact in long-term brand results. So they discovered social media data shifts that signaled changes in how consumers or competitors were adjusting their media mix. So the senior director described how she used the social data in Similarweb to look at competitors and where they use social platforms. She said they would benchmark their social traffic against their competitors. And if they saw a big shift in marketing mix, where the customers were or the competitors were increasingly using Instagram or Twitter or YouTube, it alerted them that they needed to make a change and get ahead of that. So they did their own audit to understand the communication strategy as it related to what competitors were doing, and they reacted to it and really got ahead of that. Increased trend awareness. So Similarweb worked with the organization to build a tool to understand which trends it should act on for content creation or product innovation. So they told us the tool that they made took global data and search trends and really codified them. It categorized the trends based on what they saw in the market, and it identified nascent or emerging mature trends based on search volume impressions. And this is really ties into our next benefit or our next unquantified benefit around enhanced new product creation. So they told us how their team used Similarweb to optimize existing products or create new ones. Because social trends and keyword interest areas are the first indicators of consumers' need, they really worked with Similarweb to create an early indicator tool. And it helped them decide what the opportunity was, how quickly they needed to innovate or pull products in those spaces. So the result of this was that they actually created sort of new all-natural products because that's what they were hearing about in the market based on the information gathered from these trends. They also tweaked some of the scents for their existing formulations based on insights gathered from consumer behavior, search engines, and retail sites. And finally, they learned that consumers prefer transparency regarding their ingredients, so they really enhanced their current product innovation or current product information that they displayed on their website. They uncovered new affiliate opportunities. So they told us how they saw many of their competitors using affiliates to drive traffic back to their website. And they really weren't doing much with that before. So they used the data to reach out to those affiliate networks or to really double down where they thought it would be effective. And then finally, improved return on agency relationships. So the senior director described how the company improved its working relationship with its agency partner. She said, they looked at how they work with their agency differently, and they actually worked together to not only sort of create an ROI model, but to create a new incentive model that would optimize the relationship between the two of them. So the agency partnered with the client to execute on the new strategy. And by taking some of the work that Similarweb's consulting group created and leveraging the tools that I mentioned and they created together, the agency actually took on more scope with the organization. And because they were lowering investment in some areas, they increased investment in other areas with the agency, and it didn't impact their overall spend. So next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, flexibility in the case study means the ability to engage in future initiatives, but really not the obligation to do so. So by implementing Similarweb, it creates the possibility of additional uses and business opportunities in the future. So as you can see from the quote here, the interviewees expressed a strong desire to conduct even more analysis on the additional brand categories more consistently. And I heard that across all of the interviews that I did. Not only did they want to expand to more categories, but they wanted to increase the frequency in which they reviewed the same analysis. Finally, they talked about continuing to use Similarweb to create really compelling website content because they realized that that content will really help to drive organic search results. So you can't have an ROI study without a discussion of costs. So let's get into that and talk a little bit about the different categories of costs. So on the next slide, Forrester modeled the costs for the study. Can you flip to the next slide? Great. We modeled the costs for the study based on the size and the scope of the interviewed organization. So this organization paid $690K both for licensing and professional services fees for Similarweb. So a lot of the tools that I mentioned that they created, which really resulted in this powerful analysis, were created both by the client and the professional services organization from Similarweb. In addition, we modeled the people costs on the client side. So to realize the value, we accounted for the time from the Similarweb client, not only for training and ongoing management of the tool, or ongoing management, but the time that they spent building out those tools that allowed them to recognize the value of what we talked about today. So that time totaled over 3 years, a risk-adjusted number of $221,000. All right, so the next slide. So you saw these numbers earlier, and now you know how we arrived at them. So from all of the benefits and the costs that I described, I would really encourage you to go and look at the study because there's a lot more detail around how we calculated each one of those benefits. In fact, in the tables, we actually show you where we made an assumption or where the formulas are, so you can potentially apply those to your own business. So the risk-adjusted ROI and NPV payback and payback period values that you see are determined by applying risk-adjusted factors to the unadjusted results. So for each benefit and cost, to determine present value of each of the benefits and costs, we apply a 10% yearly discount rate. So again, I really appreciated the opportunity to speak to the Similarweb customer and all the interviewees and really understand how they were using this platform to really derive the value that we talked about today. And with that, thank you for listening, and I'll hand you back over to Baruch.
Amy, thank you. This is fantastic. For those of you who stayed, this is just really, we did a hone in into a large CPG in the health and beauty. And as you can see, this is a lot of the information that when a practitioner wants to bring in many cases to the CMO, to the CFO, to the CEO, and being able to really look at the overall spend and where can we look into optimization. But the truth is that we at Similarweb, we've seen a lot of other companies who are really focusing about that efficient growth, right? And so really it's about not just at a very large spend, but also in a much smaller spend. So, for example, some pet companies who are looking to reallocate a lot of their money into paid search, but we see it also with other channels, and we're going to show you some specific example in the application that can be used also for the day-to-day practitioner. Or we've seen some other large companies who are basically looking well into which publisher they're working, very much in line with what we just heard about the PR benefit and who are the right publisher that can help me work in increasing the traffic. So really some great stuff here that we see with other customers, and we welcome you to speak to our team, and they can definitely share more of these case studies. At Similarweb, we do two big things, right? We follow large macro trends because we sit in a lot of data, and we're able to look in things at the macro level and the micro level. At the macro level, we definitely are giving and sharing information to our customers at the global trends. So this is just an example of something we did with paid and organic search, and you can see the difference in magnitude over time. That helps in many cases for organizations to sort of detect some global trends, and we are giving those trends not only at the aggregates, but the aggregates at an industry and the aggregates at a sub-industry. So you basically are able to really understand how much of that industry sometimes is picking up or slowing down, which is the game right now of how you're actually looking at the overall growth and spend. And so in this scenario, we're seeing, for example, how much more money is being spent on paid search. And this was really post-COVID. As you can expect, the holiday season typically saw some steep. And we're also giving you the information, as I mentioned, based on particular categories. And while we see here in COVID times, we got home and garden. If you are looking at our data down the road, you're actually seeing it kind of decreasing and not necessarily staying at the same level. And lastly, we can give you also the information about the consistency and the willingness to pay. And before Amy walks a little bit about the paid search and how major brands are continuing to spend a lot of money to protect their brands, even on paid search. And also we could see other sort of smaller brand riding on the bigger brands in order to go and put those bids. And so this is really important for organization, obviously, to look at their branded terms, but also understand where the money is actually being spent. And in many cases, as you can see here, no surprises, car insurance continue to be probably the biggest spend in the United States. So we've got the variety of ways of looking at things also at the macro level. And now I'm just going to bring you down into the practice and showing you some really, I think, some really cool examples here. So as you saw before, one of the biggest sort of recovered that the team have seen at this health and beauty company was the recovered cost from paid search. And so we talked a little bit about that company and their type of product, but I wanted to actually give you some sort of like real life example. So in this scenario, what you see here is you see LensCrafter, which is a lens company, basically can benchmark themselves and their spend within a group of direct competitors that they see. And what we do is we give them the tools to be able to basically understand where do they currently benchmark. So for example, LensCrafter right now, if you're looking at the top right, with the blue line, the light blue line is spending about $3.50 on PPC. And while one of the competitors is actually spending $1 less in this scenario, Zenny Optical, which is spending on average about $2.46. So basically right there, it points to you that your competitor is more efficient. And now if we just let you just focus on that as being the universe of the competitors that you want to hone in, that is your market currently that you want to ask yourself, am I spending my money correctly? We're giving you that answer. And so when you walk into the application, in many cases, we're able to show you straight ahead by comparing LensCrafter to the others and understanding where are you spending the money and where are the opportunities of others who are spending the money and why are they potentially they could be more efficient. So let's take it even a little dig deeper into that particular example. So in this scenario, we took the blue light glasses keyword market as sort of like an umbrella line. For those of you not familiar with blue light glasses, just for the fun of it, these are the glasses that have the filter in the lenses that helps minimize or absorb the amount of blue light that is entering your eyes from digital device. The idea of those glasses is to reduce the digital eye strains and prevent eye diseases and things, and just improve your sleep. And typically you can get them even without prescription. And so what you see here is that LensCrafter is actually not spending any money right now at the top here. Not spending a lot of money in this category. And sort of what is the distribution of that market, of these other players, these 4 players around there. And what you see here, that 99% of that traffic is going into their competitor. And if you just wanted to put very conservative ways of capturing from that amount of traffic that is going there, 5% of the paid search visit, with an average order value, let's say $150, with a 5% conversion rate, just there you're talking about potentially $656,000, with a spend that is about $306,000, which is about 214% in marginal revenue, right? Straight dollars into the pocket. Now, when we help them even further hone into that particular thing. So when we worked with them, we're like, okay, well, really, it's the blue light blocking glasses that are of an interest here. And when you're looking at that keyword and you're looking at, definitely it's below the $3.50 they're currently spending. And again, applying the same math on that particular keyword and the same average order value, you can see $54,000, about $10,000 of putting the spend on the actual keyword. And voila, you've got about 500% ROI, another $43,000 of marginal revenue. And so in the world of competing against, you just capture a little bit of that stuff. And we kept taking it to the next level, which is the best blue light blocking glasses. What's interesting is that we're also giving you some additional metrics that allows you to understand the difficulty in a keyword, let's say when it comes to organic search. And so in this case, the lower the score, the better it is. And so what we're pointing out to them is like, okay, you can invest here in paid. It's $2.32 in this particular keyword, best blue light blocking glasses. But you should probably start creating content around that topic and start really showing up in organic and really doing a good topic research for your SEO and create compelling content. This is merging both short-term and longer-term strategy that allows you to capture the market on all area. Again, the same type of calculation. And I think even an example like this one, which is actually a little bit below, which is a higher CPC, which is $3.45, still below of what they're currently spending, and still giving them the ability to work with the prescription glasses. So that's a little bit, we talked a little bit about specific and tactic within the digital marketing in paid search. I can say to you that we have similar models that helps you find and identify affiliates. We have additional models to help you find the right places and the right keyword research for your SEO. And we have it also in additional channel like display, of how display ads are looking at, social, and those are the type of tools that we give both to the practitioner and helps you sort of demonstrate the ROI on your marketing spend. But as mentioned earlier, we saw some benefits with other places, and research is probably an area that sometimes is underlooked in many organizations. But we all know that a lot of decision can be made with just the right data in place. And so I've mentioned about marketing, but these are some examples that we have seen in the research intelligence, where you actually are able to measure the wider industry, the market, the audiences that relates to your business, so you can react more quickly than your competitor or take advantage of opportunity and just reduce risk in investing in the wrong area. So for example, in the benchmarking industry performance, so just imagine, for example, a traditional bank with like a web and an app service benchmarking not only against other banks, but also with similar business models, but also being able to spot a rising competitor. Just a disruptive app-only kind of bank that deliver new quality in their consumer experience. So using our data that we have on the bank, they can seize on that disruption risk, and they can actually quantify it and benchmark its stickiness and its engagement against the new player and discover what it's their recipe of success. Or for example, we hear from customers, we want to better understand the market opportunity we have in this new place, in this new city or in this new country. What is the demand? Help me understand the better demand for my product. Or help me really better hone in on my supply chain so I can actually maximize the profitability. Where do I want to put my fulfillment center? And so a lot of these type of things, it helps them size the market better, what would be the demand for their product. And as a manufacturer, they actually manage their production more effectively by knowing what would be the demand over the product, and can they actually go and fulfill it without being actually wasteful. And last, sort of like a very big thing is basically, as mentioned earlier, which is, can I actually react on some audience demand? So we surface that audience demand. As you can imagine, for example, airlines, they always want some advance warning of what travelers are demanding, and they want to estimate their route capacity before even people actually bought the tickets and before they actually have been there. So they want to be able to closely monitor how travelers are actually searching and for specific destination or vacation within Google, almost like in a near real time. So that helps them understand what these booking sites is happening with them and what are the destinations that are currently hot, so they can plan their overall flight schedule and inventory. So you see that there's just like a wealth of examples here that can be used both tactically as well as in the planning. So I know we both spoke a lot, and I appreciate that people stayed here. We definitely are going to have the study, and we'll follow up with email those that register, but why don't we just open it for a Q&A? And for that, I have here James, who has been following some of the Q&A, and also feel free to start sending your question. James?
Hi, Baruch, how you doing?
Hey, good, good.
So there's a question in the chat around getting a copy of the report, which we've responded to with a link to download the report itself. Amy mentioned that some of the deep calculations are in the report. And then another question we have here is around, are there any more lightweight kind of tools or templates to help people calculate ROI within their business without going into the depth of, say, the Forrester methodology?
Absolutely. And I'll take that, and I'll also let Amy sort of address that. So yes, remember, at the end of the day, it's the tactics that you want to take. And so what we have is we have per industry. We recognize that there are some nuances of how each industry is also looking at it. And so our team, our customer success analysts, will definitely be happy to give you some of these tools. They are more basic. They're meant to sort of showing you and to your CFO, okay, if we change some of the investment on particular channels, would it actually make a difference? And I know also that Forrester themselves, who are the expert in this field of measuring the economic impact, has additional tools. So go ahead, Amy.
Yes, so we actually do create ROI tools for our clients and work with our clients to actually create these business cases for themselves. They're not, sometimes they are quite in depth, but they don't need to be. But to add on to that, I know we've mentioned this, but within the actual study itself, for each of the benefits that we calculated, we have a table there, which we include the formulas. So you could think about trying to do this yourself. And then for some of the benefits, the question addresses sort of a lighter weight analysis. for some of the benefits that were unquantified, we actually put a pretty simple table in the back of the study that really looked at how could you think about potentially quantifying the impact of creating new products based on analysis that you found, or the revenue impact of tweaking your existing products. So it at least provides you with a framework for how you can think about doing this.
That's great. So we had another question. How do you cost up resources, the intensive people time you were talking about, Amy?
Sure. So this is always a big challenge for us when we think about, looking at the benefits versus the costs. So, obviously we look to size the costs based on the organization that we've interviewed. So in this case, we interviewed a very large consumer packaged goods company. And so not only did we model out the appropriate scale for the licenses that they paid for and the professional services that they paid for, but we really factored in the people that were involved, and we calculated the percentage of time that they were working with the Similarweb tools, the platform, and the professional services organization. So we looked at, we made sure that we modeled this within the study. We not only sanity check this based on what we've asked about in the interviews, but then we'll talk to our analysts in the space to get a better understanding of, hey, is this realistic? Are we scaling this appropriately? And we want to make sure that we're trying to be as conservative as possible.
Yeah, there's another question, Amy, here related to that. So and it's funny that it's brought up. People are suspicious of big ROI numbers, net present value, and other numbers like the ones that you quoted. We also were worried about it, inviting our people to the webinar. And so how do you overcome this perception?
Yeah, we worry about it too, to be honest. And I will say when I was working on this study, I looked at this model 10 ways till Tuesday to try to think about how we could actually reduce the overall ROI, because when Forrester creates these models, we want to make sure that they're conservative and defensible. And so not only do we look at trying to take a conservative way that we build the model, so you'll see in the table that's actually in the case study, and I mentioned it here on each one of the benefit slides, that we attributed a certain percentage of the benefit to Similarweb. So that is a lever that can be pulled or changed if you were creating this model on your own. We absolutely look to risk adjust each one of these calculations. So I mentioned we risk adjust down the benefits and we risk adjust up the costs. So we're really trying to account for that within the model. I think within this, just given the nature of what Similarweb is and the value that it provides to the client, and the fact that for this particular ROI analysis, we were interviewing a very large organization who had an incredibly large marketing budget. So relative to the costs that they were paying for Similarweb and the people time involved, that resulted in the ROI that's there. But we really do encourage you to take a look at those tables and calculate your own ROI to come up with something that would be accurate for your own organization.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, it's your organization best. We have to remember that. We know where the budgets are, and we encourage people obviously to always look at that. There's no always a fixed per se number, but we definitely trying to give you here the tools in place to both do it at sort of like a higher level, at the macro level, but also in the day-to-day. How can I actually improve my activities. Also time horizon. Time horizon may change in two different things. You know, in paid search, you might see it very quickly. In organic, the time may take longer. You created content, and so it takes time sometimes for it to pick up. So it's really, you have to be able to sort of adjust these things. But with that being said, it's definitely quantifiable. It's definitely something you can show the impact of it. And frankly speaking, during this time, we all got to be a little bit smarter about the decision we're making and backing them up with data. And I think that's what we were trying to give you guys here, the capabilities as well as the insight into how it is possible. So we're up in the hour. I hope you guys enjoyed it and can share it with your colleagues. And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out. We will follow up with an email with a link into the webinar and the study. And we thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Amy, as well, for joining me today in this webinar.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.